Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on LinkedIn Live for this broadcast on Make Change Happen. I am super thrilled to have you with us to make time and to have your attention because these are the big commodities of today, time and attention. And we all strap for time and attention. So if you've chosen to spend your time here with us, I'm exceptionally happy because today one of my guests is probably someone that I am in awe of and have been looking through his work. And, his background and research work speak masses for him. His name's Paul Zak, a neuroscientist and best-selling author, have been studying how the brain works and what makes us make the change happen easier, better, faster, in a more engaged way. So then we kind of overcome the hurdle. And today, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about how we can use some of the science behind our brains, how our brains work, to make change happen better, easier, and with insights, with real-time insights, real-time measurements. Anyway, before I dig in too deep, because I'm super excited to get into the conversation, I'll let Paul introduce himself, say a few words, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into neuroscience, and how did you get exactly into that type of work about making people's brains work in a way that we can make change happen?
Thank you, Christina. Thanks for those kind words. Yes, I'm a professor at Claremont Graduate University in Southern California. I run a fairly big behavioral neuroscience lab, and I'm founder of Immersion Neuroscience, the first neuroscience as a service software platform that lets anybody measure what the brain loves in real time. Why'd I get into this? I think I'm a Martian. I'm really just trying to figure out what the humans are doing. And when we started running experiments, 25 years ago, and you would ask people, why'd you do A instead of B? And the most common answer would be, I don't know. So it's pretty hard to make progress with, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so we began looking at particular neurochemicals and pathways in the brain that might tell us why people in particular would cooperate with strangers, would help other people out when no one was looking, would donate to charity. So all those good behaviors were kind of a mystery. The bad behaviors are obvious and actually easy to measure in the lab. It's easy to make people afraid or whatever. But without freaking people out, why would you actually help anybody? But then you also ask the question, well, when does this fail? If I can understand the good behavior, I can also understand the mechanisms that lead to bad behavior. And then, as you said, I see myself as a problem solver. So I'm using this knowledge to create information, but also technologies so that people can live longer, happier, and healthier lives.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, what the title of today's talk was like, how immersive is your organizational transformation? And I know you've been doing a little bit of work, or rather a lot of work, with organizations and organizations going through changes, but also organizations in marketing, the film industry, and you've been measuring sort of the impact that different campaigns have on the human brain. Tell us a little bit about those measurements. Where do they come from and why are they important?
So the short backstory is post 9/11, a lot of money went into the Department of Defense, and we were tasked under contract with the Department of Defense to identify combinations of signals in the brain that would accurately and consistently predict what people would do after a message or an experience. So they wanted to give warfighters this new superpower called persuasion. So let's use words rather than weapons to try to get people to cooperate with U.S. goals. Awesome. We should definitely do that.
Yeah.
And so over this many years and millions of dollars of research, we know persuasion is hard, right? I mean, if persuasion was easy, all advertising would work. And so for viewers, the brain's a very lazy organ in the sense that it's so energy hungry that it establishes its default pathways. And it's actually amazing that any information we get influences our behavior because the brain's doing so much to keep us upright, breathing, and conscious. And so in doing all this work, we identified how the brain values social emotional experiences. So once we found that network in the brain, which I've called immersion with a capital I, it's a combination of multiple signals, which I can talk about. But once I found this immersion network, then you can ask a lot of interesting questions like, hey, could we actually measure, and we can, immersion second by second for this ad, or this corporate training program or this class for
Yeah.
middle schoolers or whatever we're doing, and assess what's working, what's not working, when people tune out, what they remember. So as viewers might know, for experiences with high value, that's high emotional value, right? These are unconscious experiences that people cannot relate consciously. They're saved in the brain in a very particular way. So there's a strong correlation between neurologic immersion and information recall weeks later. So again, I'm a behavioral neuroscientist. I'm not interested in people's feelings or their
Yeah.
intentions. I'm interested in, predicting behavior, and immersion does that with very high accuracy.
Yeah, fantastic. So a lot of this work is captured in your book, which I'm just going to quickly show to viewers. It's called Immersion, the Science of Extraordinary and the Source of Happiness. And it's absolutely extraordinary, diving in through some of the real life examples that you've captured in the book. And what I found extraordinary is that there's you were talking a little bit about the technology, and there's a technology app that you've developed, which works hand in hand with things like the Apple Watch or any kind of smart sort of sensor device that can send signals to the app. And it collects information in real time, the way I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And it can predict whether that experience, or rather it measures whether an experience is immersive or not immersive. And for what I have found is that what I thought would be immersive to me didn't come up as immersive on the app. And when I was going through other experiences, they came up immersive on the app. And I think here perhaps is a good time to make the distinction between what our minds thinks is immersive and what our hearts feels are immersive things.
Right.
Perhaps.
So I'm gonna I don't want to use the word immersive because that's a commonly used word. So immersion is a 1-second frequency data stream coming out of your brain. So I'm gonna for me save that. You can say what you want,
Okay.
but so
Okay. That's a
immersive
good
can mean lots of
distinction.
things, poorly defined.
Yes.
So let's say value. So what you thought was more valued.
Value.
So why would that be the case? That's a wonderful question. It's a great neuroscience question. It's because 99% of our brain activity is not open to conscious awareness. So questions like liking, do you like this ad or do you like this training, very poorly predict because, as you know in the book, people lie, and they lie because that liking is just poorly defined.
Yes.
What does liking mean? So what
Yes.
immersion captures is the brain's metabolic investment in processing the information or the experience you're having. And the higher that metabolic investment, this is a continuous variable, the more the brain goes, holy moly, I love this thing. This is so valuable. Saves in the brain. And then that saving of that information is like your sweet little grandma nudging you. Christina, remember this thing, remember this thing. So we had talked beforehand about Accenture, which has been using our technology for the past 6 years or so to measure and optimize the $1 billion they spend annually upskilling their employees on revenue, by the way, of $18 billion. So they're making a huge investment. And prior to our technology, they basically used that survey that we've all taken. Did you like the keynote speaker? What do you think of the lunch? I don't care. I'm a behavior guy, remember? All I want to know is, did that information get so effectively communicated to the audience that it's stuck in brain so that when you get back to the office on Monday, you can create value for the organization, right? So that's the key issue. And so what Accenture found over the last 6 years or so is that people cannot stay neurologically immersed for more than 20 minutes without a break in task, a break just to recover. And so they've broken their training into 20-minute modules. So I call this the 20-20-20 rule. The facilitator maybe starts the session out. He or she does not speak for more than 20 minutes. And then you switch to some active task like table work. And then that lasts for at most 20 minutes. And then you do some other active task like a debrief from the tables. They've also found that people need longer breaks because immersion is metabolically costly. Neurons fatigue, just like muscles fatigue. So the short answer here is it's like intense but short micro learning is going to be more effective than an 8-hour day. We've all learned to sit on our
Yeah.
butts. We're all overeducated, right? We can sit on our butts for
Yes.
8 hours a day, but our
Yes.
brains don't work at that
Yeah.
speed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, and I'm really interested in what Accenture are doing in the training and learning space, because as an alumni, one of the things that we were most looking forward to was the actual training, being off the client and being immersed in the training and upskilling, and we all found great benefit in that. So I'm really pleased that they're investing in that. Now, let's zoom in a little bit on organizational transformation here, and I find that the value our listeners will gain from this topic will be immense. When it comes to big changes in an organization, whether it's a change in structure or change in strategy, or we're even changing a tech platform. Maybe we're implementing AI to help us with some decision making or with some admin tasks. Things tend to be moving pretty fast in organizational change and business transformation. Numerous initiatives are on the go. There's a number of teams that are working on this. Things need to happen quickly, and a lot of the times you collect the team, you put up a pack together about what the change is all about, you share it out, and perhaps it's not the most immersive experience. Now, one of the things that you speak about in the book and as part of the immersion model is creating psychological safety. And one of the sort of the change slogans that I have is, go slow to go fast. So take the time up front to figure out how to make change happen so that it lasts, so that it creates the benefit and the value for the organization. Let's talk a little bit about psychological safety, and then talk about the storytelling side of change that I know you describe in the book, and how can we apply that to organizational transformation, especially when change is ongoing. There are, the change cycle keeps going. We're in an agile sort of state of flow at the moment. Gone are the days that we only did one project on change and then things go back to normal. There is no normal now. Everything sort of goes on and merges, and new initiatives can't come on board. How can leaders and employees create that psychological safety from a neuroscience perspective?
Yeah. So from the neuroscience side, change is always going to be difficult. So uncertainty is processed in the brain like stress. If I don't know what's happening, number one. Number two, you got this lazy brain that is already adapted to doing things in a certain way. And now you want me to change, which requires an investment of metabolic resources. So I think your question, Christina, is the key one, which how do I do this effectively? So the first is people have to be comfortable in this environment. If I come in and start yelling at people and you dumb employees, the program sucks and it's not going to work. So now I'm making everybody defensive. And now I'm shutting down from a immersion perspective. I have less bandwidth to process the information. So I think the first thing is to listen. Right before you talk, you should listen. Have a town hall meeting. Say, hey, we were doing X and it doesn't seem to be working that well. What do you guys think? So first of all, you have a voice in that. That's going to establish that psychological safety. It's not being imposed from above. As a leader, I want to take as much information as possible, which is very smart. And the second is that as a leader, you've got to make a decision. So we're going to do this new thing. And then explaining that. So as you said, taking the time to make sure people are comfortable, that you ask questions. What's often missing in pivots in organizations is explaining the why. There's a lot of focus on what, but not why. This is why, and that's where storytelling comes in. So we've shown that the most effective way to sustain neurologic immersion is to use a narrative arc, right? So you introduce characters, you show that they have authentic emotions, they have some kind of tension point, and then say this new program resolves that tension. Those could be employees, those could be customers, but really a human scale story. That's the most effective way to get the brain to invest in those resources so that individuals will really buy in to these changes. So again, change is hard. There's a mountain to climb here. And so use all those tools, use the why story, use the human scale story. If it's a slide with a 8-point font and 4,000 different numbers on it, it's just going to go nowhere.
Yeah. And a lot of the time that's what happens, right? There's a slide pack that's put together, it's been sent out to all the employees, you've been communicated about what we're doing.
Right.
Without actually having the time to hear the feedback, to understand where employees really are on their change journey, and to then invest in that outcome. You've got a little friend there. I saw the
I
tail
do. I have a little puppy. He wants attention, so I'm petting him with his hand down here. So ignore the whining.
Very nice. And I've completely forgotten what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, the PowerPoint. So I mean,
Yes.
I'm a technical guy. I'm a math guy. So I'm happy to do the analytical part of that.
Yes.
But I want to start with the story. So on the academic side of my life, because I've focused so much of my applications on effective
Yeah.
persuasion storytelling, I want to go into a story. And when I go into an academic seminar and they hear about this participant in an experiment or this patient who's suffering, and they kind of roll their eyes like, where's the goddamn analysis? I'm like, dude, slow down. We're going to get there. It's all fine.
Yeah.
Let's understand from a human scale why this is important. And I've actually had a lot of academics like critique me, like, well, you just, in the first 15 minutes was just wasted time. Was it? Was it wasted time so that we communicated the reason for the work? Not just, I thought of an interesting experiment to run, but here's a problem real humans face. Let me tell you about one of those humans.
Yes. Yeah, and I really like your advice is to use an actual character, right? So if we're talking about organizations going through change, and say we're implementing a new CRM platform, actually take someone from sales and say, how will that impact you, Mike from sales? Tell us about your experience with the old platform. What are you expecting from the new platform? And then how will that change your daily job, right? And that is so much more powerful story than having a PowerPoint slide with, this is what we're doing, these are the dates, and this is what you should be expecting, right?
And also, don't fight fair. If you're a leader, talk to Mike beforehand and go, hey, Mike, we know you've been frustrated with the old CRM. We're going to let you try the new one in beta before everyone else does.
Yeah.
Love to have you say 5 words about why the new one's better than the old one. So again, I don't want to put people on the spot. I'm worried about psychological safety as well. So Mike may be a very introverted guy who just loves to be in the background. So there is a sense, so maybe this is a little bit off topic, but we have found that there's some personality traits that are just more immersed in experiences than others. And those are people who are empathic and agreeable. And so if you have someone on your team, these are often salespeople or customer facing individuals, they're going to communicate that more effectively. Now, here's the superpower. Immersion's contagious, right? If I get that warm, empathic person, Mike, to talk about this, like I was, so frustrated for the last year using this, and now, oh my gosh. So really think about, from a presentation perspective, really 3 dimensions that affect the impact, that is the immersion, the information recall of this experience. One is, we talked about already, the structure, short and intensive. The second is, are people psychologically safe? We covered that. But the third is how I present it. So we've all been in classes with some professor who is speaking in a monotone and, oh, you just want to sleep. But if you get a mic in there who's excited and he has energy, we have shown in published research that immersion is contagious. So Mike is excited about this. So our social brain goes, holy crap, this must be important. I better really put some resources into this because, Mike, he's awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah. And this is similar to, you talk about in the book about super fans, right? And I think in terms of change management and frameworks for making change happen, a lot of the time we talk about change agents or change champions, and it's a very similar concept. Find the people that are emotionally invested in the change and can champion it and can speak about it. I'm really interested to hear from you, though. How do you identify your super fans? So then we can do that on the change side and identify the right super fans.
Right. So again, we would do it with technology, but
Yeah.
that data is de-identified. So unless people choose to tell you their ID number or whatever they logged in with, you're actually not going to know who those superfans are. But you can pick them out because they tend to be bright-eyed. They tend to be energetic.
Mm,
They're bouncing around. And so we sort of know that intuitively, right? So if you're presenting and you can see people they want to get their hand up and they want to say
yeah.
something, now it might be someone who's going to complain, but often you
Yeah.
can find those superfans. And you're right, Christina, leverage those individuals. They're super valuable, particularly at the middle management level, which is where a lot of change initiatives get stuck.
Mhm.
You got to
Yeah.
find those 3 or 4 middle managers who are on board with this. And again, I never want to be in a fair fight. I want to always win. So if I can guess who those middle managers are that will help doing this, take those guys to lunch, 2 weeks before, tell them what you're doing. Say, hey, this is not common knowledge, but I'm going to need your support here. And what
Yeah.
we find is really that asking for help as opposed to demanding, you need to, is different than, hey, Mike, this is going to take a little bit of effort on your
Mm,
part, but you are the guy to do this because you have so much positive influence on your department. Here's what we're doing. I really need you to kick in here. Can you do that for me? I'm like, oh yeah, sure.
yeah.
Different
Yeah, that
story.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Now, when it comes to the app and to organizations or even just projects using the app, is that possible?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so the app's called Six, SIX. People can download for free, and it's a neurologic measure of thriving. So we've shown in published research you need 6 of these high value, high immersion moments a day to build your emotional fitness, to really
Hmm.
thrive. This means you're engaged in life, you're doing stuff. This is the opposite
Yes.
of stress, right? So stress is that psychological safety, that's table stakes. Once you're reasonably psychologically safe, are you engaged with people? Are you doing stuff that's exciting?
Mm.
Are you building up
Yes.
that resilience? And so, what we want to do is have sustainable organizations. So, I'm quite concerned, Christina, about the decline in population. So, our fertility in all the developed world is declining. I mean, fertility is below replacement rate. Now,
Right.
Australia, US are balancing that with some immigration, but even that is complicated. We know from other places in the world. So, my view is I want to keep the people working physically healthy, emotionally safe, but also thriving. I want them to get so much satisfaction. So there's
Mm.
interesting research showing that people get more key value moments at work than at leisure. Why would that be the
Mm.
case? Well, at work, I've got people who depend on me. I've got clear objectives. I've got a goal.
Clear
Where if I'm
goals.
sitting
Yeah.
watching the couch, watching sports or something, sitting on the couch, it's not very goal oriented. So we need these challenges to really thrive. And so I think about organizational change. Think about this as giving people a challenge, giving them feedback, giving them a chance to do something new, and getting that energy focused on doing this new thing. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yeah, and I suppose having those clearly defined outcomes and benefits and how each of the different team members can contribute to those goals and benefits makes sense to then for them to be more emotionally invested in the outcome and more immersed in the outcome, right?
So there's a cheat here. Again, I always want to cheat. I want to win. So cheat in the broad sense. Our brain actually is attracted to the new thing. So we have particularly part of this
The new
network
shiny
called immersion.
syndrome, the new
Yeah.
shiny,
So
yes,
now
object.
that'll get you into it, but it's still got to generate that emotional value. So again, I want to sell this to my employees, right? I
Yes,
want to sell this
yes,
new thing so they see, hey, this is going to be better for you, right?
yeah.
Employees are very hip to, it's not, we want to get more work out of you for the same money. That's not going to work. But if you say, look, this is to make your life better because now on average, you guys spend 4 hours a week on the CRM. You're going to cut that to 2 hours a week. And you have more time to meet clients, meet with your team,
Mm,
whatever that is, like really clear objectives. And then using the Six app will show employees that, hey, before this change, I got on average 3 high value moments a day. And now I'm getting 7. Like,
yes.
oh, actually, work got better. Like I'm really thriving. And so, again, just that measurement on your phone is a great
Mm,
way to reinforce this thing. So when we see, I'm probably NDA'd, but anyway, when we see companies, we mentioned Accenture, which I'm not NDA'd on, doing organizational change, getting that baseline, say, hey, here's an employee benefit. We're going to give you this chance before we make any changes, and you're going to see you employee are going to see that this is actually going to be better for you objectively. These signals
Yes.
come from your brainstem. You can't control them consciously.
Yeah.
And if it's not better, come talk to me. If you're not seeing an increase in your ability to thrive, let's sit down and have a
Yes.
discussion about that, because maybe I haven't communicated well enough, or we haven't trained you in this new process well enough. I want to know that. I want to be on top of that.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm a big believer in just being open about everything. Everybody's going to figure it out eventually. So these are all, I call these management experiments, right? These are all experiments. We don't know if this new thing is going to be better. We think it is. That's why we're doing it. And if I
Yes.
say, hey, this is an experiment we're going to run, we think it's better for these reasons, and we're going to make sure it's better for you as an employee, gosh, who can not be on board with that?
Yes. And I think it speaks masses for being open, being able to be open. I think not all leaders are there yet, but we're slowly moving towards a more open, collaborative sort of culture within the corporate world. But also, I think because of that constant change pace and constant initiatives that we've had in the pipeline, people are feeling a lot of change fatigue. People are a little bit frustrated with change. And, we've seen a lot of changes that don't work. We've seen a lot of leaders sort of lead change not in the way that we would have imagined them to lead it. We would have expected better. And I think that advice sort of stands true even in those situations. Just if we open up and we listen to feedback of what you are saying, and kind of look for those, bright-eyed moments or suggestions from the employees, then we can include that and co-create change together, rather than it being sort of a laid out plan of this is exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's where the listening sessions come in prior to change. First of all, get as much information. A lot of brains here,
Yeah.
and presumably most people like their jobs. They want to keep their jobs, so they're going to be down with change that will sustain that organization. But the second is, really understanding that it's going to be difficult, and it's got to be presented in a way that's going to be at least attractive and exciting, and be really clear in the outcomes. And here's another superpower, which is vulnerability. Often is very attractive for people who are competent. If you say, look, I can't do this alone. Mike, I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need Sue's help. I'm going to need Fred's help. And so we've got to come together as a group and make this happen. I think that's different than I demand that, right? So that vulnerability is well known to be attractive. So in psychology, it's called the pratfall effect. So the example is when John F. Kennedy was president, there was this planned invasion of Cuba that was the previous president kind of set up. And they're like, the generals are like, yeah, we should do that. We'll get rid of Castro. And Kennedy had been in power, I don't know, less than 6 months. He's like, yeah, I guess it's good. Sure, go invade Cuba. And it was a total failure. It's called Bay of Pigs. Anyway, after this failed and some people got killed, Kennedy went on TV and said, I'm the president. I approve this. It was a big mistake. I own that mistake, and I'm trying to get to be a better president. This is a learning experience for me, and I blew it, but I would like your support so I learn to be a better president for you. And his approval ratings went up. So that was a big pratfall, but he was vulnerable and he owned it. So again, people know, everyone has phones, everyone's taking pictures of everything. So, you can't hide stuff anymore. And
no, times have definitely moved on, but it's such a powerful example that if you admit and if you're open to people's feedback, and you're looking for for making things better. Now, if you are joining us now, or if you have joined us after we started, I am speaking today to Dr. Paul Zak, who's a neuroscientist and a bit of a guru on how the brain works and how we make decisions. Dr. Paul has also done a lot of work in the marketing space, which I'm actually really interested, because I believe change management and marketing have very similar parallels, right? We're trying to sell an idea. We're trying to get people to move to a different state organizationally. Well, in marketing, we're trying to sell them a product. We're trying to sell them an idea, whatever that is. So I wanted to a little bit digress from where we are and maybe talk about how you measured the effectiveness of some of the marketing campaigns and ads. Because I think if we can measure the effectiveness of some of the organizational change campaigns, then that will give leaders a real you know, a real time understanding of if that change is going to be successful or not?
What a great question, Christina. Thank you. Yeah, I think there's great parallels there. Right, part of this is really talking about communication. And
Mm,
when we first started with the company, David Ogilvy said, famous ad guru guy, 90% of advertising doesn't do anything. So why is
right.
that? Right? Because we have focus groups, because people don't really know. And
Mm,
the Nobel Prize winner, Danny Kahneman, is a famous psychologist, published research, I think in the early 80s, showing that people have very poorly defined preferences over things they haven't seen before.
right.
Like, would you like this crazy widget? I don't know what it is, but what do
Yeah.
you think about it? Well, I don't know. I haven't used it, So you really have to communicate in an effective way what this thing is so people feel comfortable. So again, the liking question is not going to work. So we've done a fair amount of work with people using the Immersion platform to look at
Mhm.
public relations. So companies that actually help CEOs craft public relations, whether
Yes.
that's in video or live. And my view is these should be rehearsed. I mean, you write them out, practice
Mhm.
them. Often they're
Mhm.
practiced with a couple employees and like, hey, boss, you're awesome. What you really want to know is, for a kind of random sample of humans, am I hitting the high points? And so, again, another
Yes.
key takeaway is that it's emotions that tag an experience with importance. I need that
Mhm.
emotional buy-in. So if I have 2 or 3 important points in this communication, I want to make sure those happen at these emotional peaks, these peaks of immersion. So in advertising, that would be the call to action, right?
Okay.
So oftentimes what you see in ads is a nice little narrative arc, a story. Everyone knows this. But then the call to action is at the very end when the tension's really low.
Yes.
So the
Yes.
way to beat that back is to have a branding moment, or have a call to action in the middle, or have a car with your company logo or whatever, front of the store, whatever that is, at the peak of that immersion moment. Or
Mhm.
don't resolve the story. So if people look at theatrical movie trailers, generally about 3 minutes, a lot of movie studios use our technology to improve movie trailers. You'll see that
Mm.
those essentially show half of a narrative, right? They introduce characters, they put them in a weird environment, so now you're interested, right? That's the
Yes.
present
Yes.
response, and then there's tension, there's some crisis, and then you got to buy a ticket to find out what happens.
Mm.
Does the boy die? Does the girl die? Do they fall in love? Does the world explode? And so that's not a bad idea for communications, which is I'm the CEO, I'm going to communicate about organizational change. I'm going to tell you half the story. I'm going to tell you about this
Mm.
employee or this customer or this division that's going under something I can really understand, and then say, now the rest of the story is up to you guys. So after listening to you, here's
Mm.
what we've done. So again, that's all testable. If I'm going to use that kind of communication, you can use the emerging technology and go, oh, have I really captured people,
Yes.
or am I just kind of droning on? So again, useful takeaways as opposed to, use our software. Useful takeaways: hit them hard, hit them fast, have a clear call to action, right? Don't
Yes.
don't don't be willy-nilly about what people are supposed to do. So here's the problem, here's a human scale story talking about that problem, and here's the solution. So same thing with advertising and selling. I'll be really clear on what the problem is, a human that's facing that problem,
Mm.
and then the product or service that's going to solve that problem. And we all
Yes.
can understand that. So let me give you the opposite. Sorry, I'm almost done, but give you the
Yeah.
opposite
Yeah. Yeah.
example,
Good.
which is why are there puppies and toilet paper commercials? They got nothing to do with toilet paper, or babies. If you put a puppy or a baby in commercial and you do a focus group and go, do you like this? Sure. Come on, it's got a puppy. Who's going to say they don't like a commercial with a puppy in it? You have to be a bad person, right? So that's the reason you have puppies and toilet paper commercials, because they think it makes you feel better, but your brain is not fooled by that, right? So
Mm.
there's a lack of congruence between the problem and the product or service that's supposed to solve the problem. So really think
Yeah.
about that problem, narrative, solution approach for advertising or for corporate communications.
Yeah. I was just thinking about what you were saying earlier about the call to action, and I was reflecting on some of my work with clients and previous projects, and it hasn't always been clear, that call to action. And in most cases, when this is what we need to achieve, and this is what's going to happen, but the call to action hasn't necessarily been clear. it hasn't been communicated in a way that employees really understand, well, what does that mean to me? How does that impact me? And what do I need to do to make it successful?
Right.
So having that, I think, would be instrumental, and just having that point of clarity and point of elevation for the employee to contribute would make it
And get a
so much more
satisfaction from
meaningful.
helping, right?
Yeah,
Get that
that's right.
satisfaction, like, oh, my community of colleagues needs me now.
Mm,
I want to do my part to help out with this. Oh, you
yes.
feel great. Okay, yeah. Hey, honey, what happened at work today? Oh man, we had this big change, and then the CEO said our department's got to do this thing, and gosh, it's going to be hard, but I think we can do it, and it's really important, and here's why.
Mm,
So think of that storytelling. What does that person go home thinking about? Right.
yes.
Again, if it's same money for doing more work, that's not gonna, it's not gonna fly.
That's a tough gig.
Yeah. The war for talent is over. Talent has won. So let's really
Yeah.
cherish these people and then empower
Yeah.
them to really get that satisfaction from doing that challenge, meeting that challenge. Again, it's so good for
Mm,
the brain to have a challenge, just like the 6 act for emotional thriving. Like if you don't have a
yeah.
challenge in your life, if you're just wrapped in bubble wrap and sitting on the couch, you're not living. You're just, eking out an existence.
Yes. Oh, I wanted to touch a little bit about technology, because obviously you're using technology. AI is now becoming such an integral part of our workday life. Soon enough, ChatGPT will be integrated into Apple products, so we'll be having ChatGPT in our pockets, and we're using AI in change management more and more to predict sentiment, to assist with decision making going forward, to assist with data and analytics and so on. But there's still that disconnect between trusting AI and trusting technology from an employee standpoint, and kind of having a coherent relationship between leadership, employees, and AI decisions that have been thrown into the mix. From a neuroscience perspective, what have you seen that has worked, and what kind of advice can you give to organizations that may be going through that AI sort of transformation, and what can they do in terms of practical tips that can bridge the gap between trusting the technology, having it on board, and also embracing it, and having them achieve what they need to achieve?
Yeah, we don't have a ton of data yet. It's so new. We have some analogous data that I can talk about, but in general, I think the takeaway is it's not replacing what you're doing. It's just getting rid of those rote tasks
Yeah.
that you didn't want to do anyway. So we're making it faster or easier. And so I think if it's communicated as a tool, not to get rid of you, but to, improve what you're doing. So
Mhm.
I've spent some time in the Amazon distribution warehouses with the robots, and talking to people who work there, stuffing stuff in packages is that job people can last about a year. It's just too repetitive. It's
Yes.
not fun. But what Amazon's doing is now training those people who used to stuff things in packages to manage the robots. Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So they're actually paying to train their own employees, and that's
Mm.
watching a dashboard, seeing if they need to be charged. They get stuck sometimes, so stopping everything. But by the way, the robots move really fast, so they're in lanes, and they're like blocked off. You can't go in the lanes because the robots are moving fast. So you got to stop all the robots and go and fix the wheel or whatever they're doing. So those are
Yeah.
just different jobs, right? So they're adding more things in. So I think ChatGPT is the same kind of thing where, okay, this is going to do a first draft of my customer communication.
Mm.
I still
Yeah.
need to look at that second draft. And even now, you can kind of tell when you get an email that's been AI generated, because it's sort
Yeah.
of this very averagey, it
Yes.
doesn't have that little pizzazz. So hey, great first cut. Let's add some spice to it. Let's make it a little more interesting, a little more personalized.
Yeah.
The data we have, which is I think very interesting, is looking at corporate training programs in AR versus VR versus 2D. So this also started happening in the COVID times, pandemic times.
Hmm.
So we mentioned Accenture earlier. So Accenture
Yeah, I think they were big
has,
on the VR onboarding.
yeah. So they are doing a lot of their onboarding in VR now. So your new employee, they mail you a VR headset, and they actually will often mail you a wearable like this, so they can use our technology and see how effective that is for you. And what we found is that there's a big variety in individuals who value that VR experience as good or
Hmm.
better. The nice thing about the
Yeah.
VR experience is you can repeat things that just didn't work for you, and our technology will tell you whether that was effective or not. But when we compare, for example, ads in VR versus AR, augmented reality, oftentimes AR is more immersive neurologically, because in VR, some people are still, like looking around like, oh my gosh, I'm in 3D, how cool. And so
Mm.
so I think we really have to think about the acclimation to these new technologies. I think AI is going to be the same way. I don't want to just assume like we have it, we paid for it, use it. Like, no, let's kind of roll it out. And there may be
Yeah.
people who are more likely to be the kind of early adopters. And if I find some of those who are super fans, like they can kind of spread the word. So I think this is going to be a sort of a natural process.
Hmm.
There's going to
Yeah.
be some pushbacks. I think in the U.S. we had the longshoremen union had a big strike a while ago about not
Right.
using robots. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know. Guys on cranes lifting out giant containers of, I mean, seems like that's a perfect robot job. I understand they're worried about losing their jobs, but if there was a package of retraining so that you could run the robot
Mm.
and you'd be
Yeah.
safe and you wouldn't be sweaty and, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
that seems like that could be a good deal. So
Mm.
I'm arguing here by analogy because of lack of data.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying though rings true. Again, being open and being honest with what the benefits are, the expected benefits are, what are we trying to achieve, and then having like an alternative path for those employees, or an alternative solution for whatever the AI is replacing. Sounds like
Mhm.
something that organizations can create versus just we're replacing this.
Yeah. And we see that with any new technology. I have gray hairs.
Yeah,
I remember when, everyone started getting PCs in the early 80s. They're like, "Oh my God, be out of there. No more jobs for." I'm like, no, they just created new
yeah,
jobs, right? So, electricity, cars didn't get rid of horses. They just created new jobs, right? So,
yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
I think it's that we're back to the communication part. I think we should be really clear and also be willing to roll this back. Hey, if we're spending so much time kind of fooling around with ChatGPT and we're not actually creating
mm,
value, I'd love to hear about that. Or it's too
yeah,
hard, or whatever, or maybe it's a training issue. So I think that's where really getting good data comes in, and talking to people, seeing how they use things.
yeah. So like really the key points, I guess, is to summarize some of the really key moments that we've spoken about is, be clear in your communications, use the narrative arc. Um, Training, you can get a lot of feedback from training, and just in sessions where you can gauge people's perceptions and people's
Mhm.
reactions. Use those super fans or change champions to your advantage, and really embody the story in a real scenario, real use case that can speak to not only what's changing, but how it's changing and why it's being changed.
Yeah, and you can use the free 6 app from Immersion Neuroscience and give this as a play benefit. Hey, we want to make sure you're thriving. We won't see your data, but we want to
Yes.
make sure that you are
Yeah.
getting enough value from this experience so that you're really growing as an employee, as a human being. So, for example, we have a number of police departments using our technology. And I always say, like, you're going to get a bunch of high value moments if you're a cop, but you want to make
Mm,
sure you have some energy so that your family is still getting, you still have energy for your family, your spouse, right?
yeah.
If you don't have some
Fantastic.
balance in that, that's
Yeah.
important. So I think the
Yeah.
days of employees working 100-hour weeks is long gone, but I still want to
Hmm.
have that. Even if we have work-life integration with email and phones and all that, make sure you have some energy when you get home and you're getting some value.
Yes. Yeah, and I can thoroughly recommend it. I've been using the Six app for like the past week, completely free. I'm not sponsored, or you haven't paid me any money to say
Right.
this, but I've been absolutely fascinated by the measurements and by the you know the immersive experiences that I have found. And now in the next coming weeks, I'm more likely to repeat those experiences because I understand the value that my brain is getting from these.
And the key on that, thank you for saying that. The key on that is if you add social to any experience, you almost always increase its value, right? So we still need to be
Mm,
in the office. We still need to be
yes,
around other people. So going to a movie alone, okay, but going with your friends, much better, right? So
yes,
I really
Yes,
want to encourage employees and organizations to ensure that that social component of work is not missing because
of
it
course.
degrades our value as human beings. We just become isolated and unhappy.
Yeah. And just while we're on that, though, as you can see, like companies have split in the middle a little bit between going back, mandating employees to go back to the office versus working from home. Is there like a medium that can work, as in working from home but still feel connected and still feel part of the organization from a neurological point of view? You know,
We did research on this actually pre-pandemic because
yeah.
already remote work was getting common, and we find that people get between 50 and 80% of the neurologic value of a 2D interaction like this as opposed
Hmm.
to in person. That's surprisingly high to me, and that's pretty consistent. So
Yeah.
this is not bad. It's the same reason that people cry in movies. Like it's fake, it, but you still are emotionally connected to it. So I think
That's right.
for
Yeah.
remote workers, build in a little time for that normal thing we do in in-person meetings, which is, hey, how's
Mm.
your weekend? How are your kids doing, Christina? Oh, great. Oh, your son's 3. How nice. What's he doing now? What they going doing sports? That little,
Mm.
build in that time. One thing that, I mean, people probably know this. One thing that Google does in their meetings is they do a 3-minute kind of meditation. So eyes closed, just kind of prepare yourself. And so that's another way to kind of establish that psychological safety, have a little break time. So I
Yes.
started scheduling my online meetings in 45-minute segments. So I have 15 minutes for myself to prepare, to have a drink, prep for
Yes.
my next meeting. I don't want to run meeting to meeting to meeting. And so, yeah, I think it's building those connections. So a couple things on remote work. One is we're seeing in the US at least about 3 days a week seems to be about the average now. So many
Mm.
people will do a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for obvious reasons, but kind of thinking about 3 days a week as the expectation, number one. Number two, if the boss is in the office, people are more likely to be in the office, right? So it's one of those things like, oh, yeah, Mike, our favorite employee, Mike, is always showing up Monday through
Yes.
Friday. And so I don't have to because, again, the war for talent has been won by
Yeah.
talent. But I would like Mike to see me working.
Mm.
And I think the third thing is if everyone is a remote worker, try to do offsites regularly. So at least once a quarter. If you can do it once a month, that's better. And that could be pizza and beer. I'm okay with that, but we really have to get to know each other. So think about building those emotional attachments that just make work easier. By the way, we published research recently showing that open office plans
Yes.
facilitate greater teamwork, more cooperation, and actually a faster reduction of the stress of working than being in
Mm.
a closed space. And so think
Yeah.
about couches, Wi-Fi. Again, cheat. I want to cheat on everything. Free pizza and beer on Fridays for people coming on Fridays. All those
Yeah.
things to remind people that work is a social activity. It's not just a lone activity,
Yeah.
and we're working in teams. So get to know your teammates.
Yeah, and so important for organizational change because a lot of the times the team is thrown together, people haven't worked together previously. It's kind of they haven't got that rapport, they haven't got the social interaction going. Maybe they're in remote places as well, maybe in their interstate or international. So uh, great tips there, Dr. Zach. I am extremely grateful for your time. And I know we're coming to the top of our time here. So I wanted to again give people the chance to have a look at your book, which I've got on the banner. Here we go.
It's
It's called
wonderful.
Immersion. Is an it's a really insightful read. And again, as I was talking today about change and marketing being very similar, you'll find there real life examples of what would make an ad campaign successful or not. So if you haven't got a copy of this, please go ahead and grab one. And I also wanted to ask you, Dr. Zach, if people wanted to find out more about you or to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to get connected?
The best ways you can find me at getimmersion.com. If you're listening to this, then you can send me an email. You can ask me questions. Happy to chat with people. And the app that we've talked about, which is free, that helps you build your emotional fitness, you can find at your6.com. And happy to take questions from folks.
Yeah, fantastic. And I've just put your website down at the bottom if people wanted to get to your website. And thank you once again for your time. For everyone that's joined us live, if you have any follow-up questions or you wanted to get connected, please do so on LinkedIn. It's such a wonderful platform, and it's given us the chance to have a real-life conversation to a real-life neuroscientist. So awesome. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a